What is the weirdest Grand Prix motorcycle race? 77 years, over 3,400 races. Is there any way to say for sure which one is the weirdest? Probably not, no, but we can try. There have been some very weird ones in recent memory. 2014 Germany was pretty odd, so was 2018 Argentina, but I don't think that just a weird start qualifies for the single weirdest race ever. I'm not sure that today's race is the weirdest one of all time, but when I stumbled upon it in this book and read the race report, I just had to talk about it, and that's because only 2 riders finished this race. Upon digging deeper, I found out that this race actually has a whole lot of important history and could even be considered a key turning point in the very early days of Grand Prix motorcycle racing. My name is B, this is the Beehive Paddock, and today we're talking about the 1950 125cc Ulster Grand Prix, a 1 vs 1 Grand Prix race. But before we start talking about the race itself, we need to set the stage. The year is 1950. The second season of the Grand Prix Motorcycle Racing World Championships is underway, and the major powerhouses are Great Britain and Italy. Not just the riders, but the manufacturers as well. Now, if you know anything about this period of European road racing, you know that the British and the Italian manufacturers were in a constant war trying to prove one was better than the other. And this was the battle that would really define the first decade and a half of the sport. And this race was a critical blow from the Italian manufacturers for the lightweight classes. See, in the early days, the 125cc machines didn't race at every round of the championship, and the Italian 125 machines, which had dominated the smallest class in the first season of the championship, had yet to make a full factory appearance at the British Isles. But with the 125 scheduled to run at the prestigious Ulster Grand Prix for the first time in 1950, 11 Italian riders from Moto Marini, Mondial, and MV Agusta were scheduled to show off the might of these tiny machines for the first time. Unfortunately, this field of 11 riders failed to fully materialize on the day. The MVs and Marini machines failed to even make it to the event, leaving only 6 Mondial entries. But on the day, only 3 of them showed up. When asked where their teammates were, they were confused. They were the only riders scheduled to be there from Mondial. As it turns out, an error in a telegraph sent by Mondial had led the race organizers to list each rider twice, once by their first name and once by their surname. So only 3 riders would race in the smallest class at this event. Let's meet each of them. First and favorite was Bruno Ruffo. Already an established star prior to the World Championship's inaugural season, he had proven himself by winning the inaugural 250cc season aboard a Moto Guzzi machine. When that brand fell on hard times between seasons, they allowed him to race for other manufacturers in different classes, and he quickly signed a contract with Mondial to race 125s. He impressed quickly by taking a win at the opening round at the 25th anniversary of the Dutch TT. Next up was Carlo Ubbiali. Ubbiali wasn't yet a legend, but he would go on to become one. In his career, he would win 9 world championships, the most ever at the time and still tied for 3rd today, and would secure wins in half of his races and podiums in over 85% of them. He was the greatest little bike specialist until Nieto and the greatest Italian rider until Agostini. But none of that had happened yet. He was still an up-and-coming young rider, and he was making his Mondial debut at this race, having ridden for MV the year prior and secured a podium in his first season. He had everything to prove here. The final rider was Gianni Leoni, who had begun his racing career pre-war and had done very well in national competition. He made his Grand Prix debut at the Nations Grand Prix in 1949, the final round of the 125 season, and had won the race, earning himself a full factory ride for 1950. Earlier in this season, he had just barely lost the Dutch TT to Bruno Ruffo by less than a bike length, and he was out looking for revenge at the second round of the year. Alright, we've covered the bikes and the riders, now all that's left is the circuit. Regular viewers already know where this is going, but if you're not aware, this is the Claudy circuit. 16.5 miles of way too many straights, including this 7-mile one. I don't care if there's elevation change, you can't fix this, but in this day, it wasn't as offensive. With less powerful bikes and tire technology not really supporting getting under your opponent in a corner for a pass anyway, there was no point in having that many. In addition, there wasn't TV coverage, so there was no reason to keep constant action. The most any spectators would see the bikes for was a few seconds each lap, and everyone else would just read it like I did. What this circuit with all of its straights did provide was an opportunity for the Italian machines to get up to top speed and stay there. And when the 3 competitors got off for Friday practice, they immediately shocked the crowd with the speeds of their machines. Unlike the Club 125 meetings on short circuits that these fans were used to watching, which averaged speeds around 45 miles per hour, these bikes were lapping the Claudy circuit in excess of 75 miles per hour. Unheard of figures in Britain and Ireland at the time. I couldn't find any definitive qualifying results for this race, but frankly, with just 3 riders, I don't really think it matters. They probably all just lined up anyway. And so, come race day, the pre-war star and one of just 4 world champions at the time, Bruno Ruffo, the future 9-time world champion and MotoGP Hall of Famer, just beginning to get his break, Carlo Ubbiali, and Gianni Leoni, lined up for the 10-lap, 165-mile race on Sunday. They were released down Bally Hill, and the race for the future of the smaller capacity classes was on. The Italians would shock the crowd yet again when they came back around just 12 minutes later. The reason this had shocked the crowd so much was because the Ulster Grand Prix was actually run with all 4 classes on the racetrack simultaneously, with each class being released in a separate mass start with decreasing order of engine capacity. So the 500s went first, followed by 350s, then 250s, and finally the 125s. The 125 riders had completed their first lap ahead of many of the 250 riders. Not only should the 250s have been dominant machines, they were also released a full minute ahead of the 125s. The crowd was in for a third shock not too long later, when the results of a flying kilometer from Bruno Ruffo came in. Lying flat on his tank, he had clocked a speed of 84 miles per hour. For a 125cc machine 75 years ago, that's pretty good. The race itself was as good as you can get for a 3-man race. They were all pretty evenly matched and on equal machinery. They battled closely for the first 2 laps, but Ubbiali and Leoni came in for pit stops, giving Ruffo a lead of 37 seconds over Ubbiali by half distance. On lap 7, Ruffo couldn't stay out any longer, and he pitted himself. Gioni also retired on this lap. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the cause of his retirement, whether it was a mechanical or a crash. I simply don't know. But regardless of how it happened, it was now a race between 2 riders, the established veteran and the new blood, duking it out at one of the most iconic Grand Prix on the calendar, a 1 versus 1 showdown in an official Grand Prix World Championship race. As far as I know, the only one of its kind in history, and the race with the fewest finishers of all time. Ruffo came out of the pits to find Ubbiali 14 seconds ahead of him, and the young rider was refusing to give up any ground, instead putting his head down and stretching his lead by the end of lap 8. Lap 9 would be the fastest lap of the weekend, and by extension, a new lap record, 12 minutes and 33 seconds, or 78.92 miles per hour. He would go only 4 seconds slower than that on the final lap, and Ruffo eased off, knowing he was beaten, and coming across the line 1 minute and 5 seconds behind Ubbiali. The 2 riders had finished their races with average speeds of 77.46 miles per hour and 76.81 miles per hour respectively. These speeds were so high, they would have put them in 4th and 5th in the 250 class, ahead of every single British machine there, and only behind the 3 Italian 250s, which had swept the podium. This race signaled the future of the sport. Italian machinery was where it was at in the early days of the World Championship, and while the fight between the British and the Italians would continue on for a while longer in the larger classes, it was already over in the 125s and 250s. With the Italians only relinquishing a single title to German Mark NSU until Honda began their dominant campaign in 1961, with Mondial themselves being responsible for 5 of those constructors' titles. Meanwhile, Ubbiali had taken his very first Grand Prix win, and would go on to be a national hero, who would win 39 races and secure 68 podiums in less than 80 career starts, and would quit while he was still ahead. Ruffo would go on to win that year's 125cc World Championship. Ubbiali had missed the first round, and that was too much of a points deficit to recover from. He would never enter the 125 championship again, but would compete in the 250s for a number of years, winning the title yet again in 1951 and bringing his final tally to 3 world championships. Leoni would win the final round of that season, coming 2nd place in the championship, and would win a 3rd career race the following year. But sadly, he would suffer a fatal collision with teammate Sante Gimignani in the following year's Ulster Grand Prix, a tragic ending to his racing career. Was the 1950 Ulster Grand Prix the most exciting or wildest race of all time? No, probably not. But it is almost like a microcosm of the very early days of the World Championship, and it was a key signal of things to come, both on the front of the riders and for the manufacturers. This race, to me, is emblematic of the beauty of the early days of the championship. There were shocking innovations being made constantly that weren't posted on the internet for everyone to read months in advance. Imagine if Honda showed up with a new Moto 3 bike at preseason testing and it started lapping faster than all but the very best Moto 2 bikes. It would be world-shattering. Or imagine if 3/4 of the field didn't show up because of a botched email formatting. These things are unimaginable to us in the modern day, but that's what happened here. And there are many, many stories just like this from the early days of the championship. It's the stories like this one, with the wild pioneers of the sport navigating an unorganized and ever-evolving world championship, that are not only some of my favorites to hear, but also help shape the sport that we all love today. Thank you very much for watching, and a special thank you to my channel members: MVP2112, Venturian CRO, Sean, Moto Sapien, B, Jack the World's Fastest Maori, Drew Gibbs, Carl Ruppersberg, Really Very Bored 1, Schmalutin, Troy the Boy, and Money Penny. It's starting to take a while. I'm gonna run out of space there soon. If you would like to support the channel in the best way possible, become a channel member by clicking the join button down below. One last thank you for watching, and to everyone out there, have a fantastic day.